another legendary episode. Hello, Mr. Ridgely. How are you this evening?
I am excellent. How are you, Mr. Madison?
I'm doing very, very well. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We're going to have a wonderful, wonderful, jam-packed episode of The End of the Night. Hello, Mark. We have back-to-back legends. Like last week, one of our finest episodes, I think, of the show ever. We had the horror icon John Russo. And tonight we follow him up with probably one of the greatest film composers of all time, and a man who worked with John Carpenter on numerous occasions, Mr. Alan Howarth. But before we start with all of the greatness, I want to tell everybody that this show is brought to you by Film Hub. If you are a filmmaker who wants to get their film out on multiple platforms and out for the world to see, reach out to Film Hub. They're really a wonderful company. They're a godsend to independent filmmakers, and not only do they help us with this show, but they also have, I think, my entire catalog now, and I've been nothing but pleased with how they are getting my films out there. So if you're an independent filmmaker and you want to get your film out on several platforms, reach out to Film Hub.
And also brought to you by StreamYard. People often ask us how our video streams stay looking professional and have all these cool features. So that would be StreamYard. They have a free trial. Tell them the Indie Escape Network sent ya.
Absolutely. And what's that lovely, lovely business that your beautiful wife and daughter have?
Well, thank you for asking. That would be Hearts of the Mystic Folk. Check out their line of awesome, all-natural scented wax melts available in a variety of fun and seasonal scents.
Now, Joe, there is just so much unbelievable stuff happening at this moment. Next week, if anybody who watches this show knows what's going on next week, next Sunday night, Halloween night at 10 p.m. Eastern, right here, we're going to have the Lost Vincent Price interview that was conducted by my brother and I many, many moons ago. Mr. Price talks about everything from a third Dr. Phibes movie that never happened to his favorite actors and actresses that he worked with. We're going to have an all-star show that night of people who are going to join us and discuss this historic recording and this historic event. Brian O'Halloran's going to stop by. Debbie Rochon's going to stop by. Jim Crutt's going to stop by. Camden Toy's going to stop by. The list goes on and on. So join us next Sunday night at 10 p.m. There's going to be even more people announced between now and Halloween night for this historic show next Sunday, 10 p.m. right here on David Lee Madison's End of the Night Facebook page, the Indie Escape page, and is it the Indie Escape Yahoo page?
YouTube.
Sorry,
Channel.
I'm getting I actually been going to Massachusetts almost every weekend, and I leave and just get home by the skin of my teeth to do the show. And to give you an idea, it's like a 4.5 hour drive, but tonight it was like a 6.5 hour drive because it was like crazy, crazy crowded. And so I apologize if I'm a little bit off my game, but everybody who watches this show knows that I'm pretty much off my game every episode because I'm old and senile, but it's part of my charm. Another enormous.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to bring up something real fast that
Yeah.
our friend Sean Smithson from
Yes.
Smithson
We love
Wood
Sean.
Creation. That's
Oh,
a piece of wood.
wow.
That is etched on wood.
That is absolutely gorgeous, Sean. That is unbelievable. Wow. Yeah, that's really epically cool. Another thing that's pretty cool, Joe. I think it was Wednesday. Wednesday, Scott and I and convened and shot his footage for Full Moon Fever. And all kidding aside, I don't know. Well, let's bring up, without further ado, our lovely co-host and Grand Poobah and wonderful all-around guy, Grunkle Scott Schiaffo.
All right, and also make sure to look at the comments. Getting a lot of comments. I just meant in general.
Oh, okay. So Scott,
That was,
It was-
it was
it was-
Thursday.
it was Thursday? Yeah.
Thursday.
It was pretty. It was a pretty epic day of filming. I mean, you really, really brought it. Not that you don't always bring it, but it was just. I don't know if it was the material, or if it was a character that you were just born to play. But man, when I got home, I was so excited that I actually took some of the footage of some of the dailies and watched and tried to put it together to see if it was really as wonderful as it seemed. But man, it was epic.
Dude, you're very kind. But the truth is, you did present an interesting challenge that you don't always get to be challenged
Thank you, Michael.
in a safe environment.
Hey, Ken.
So that's what that's all about. And I got to do some things that, because I was in that safe environment, creative, safe bubble, we did some pretty cool things. It was a really, I had a great time, man. I really
No,
did.
yeah, no. I mean, I'm actually chomping at the bit for the public to see the work that we did, especially together, because it was pretty epic. So again, thank you. That was awesome. And Joe, I actually will be shooting with you, hopefully before the first week of November, and I'll explain to you how this is going to work. And that's a weird thing, but okay.
I'm not seeing any of the comments. Did I not look?
No, some I have no idea what that was. I don't know. Is your mic off, Joe? You're gone. Now you're back.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
So when shows become more popular, people tend to send out ugly bots to live broadcasts,
Oh.
and that's kind of one of those. No.
Well, anybody who is looking at our comments, as you know, we have no control over who watches the show, but we
I blocked those.
But we apologize for the low lives out there who just say like disgusting things. But be that as it may, so we have the big Halloween show coming up next Sunday with Vincent Price and an all-star cast. Scott and I got to shoot our Full Moon's Fever stuff that I'm super excited about. We had John Russo on last week discussing about how, he essentially created an entire genre and clearing up a lot of misconceptions about, things that happened as far as that. It was just really, if you didn't see last week's episode, do yourself a favor and watch the John Russo episode because it was fantastic.
Oh, it was very heartfelt and emotional, actually. So definitely check it out on YouTube or Facebook. Absolutely.
It was just an absolutely wonderful show. And in a few moments, I'm going to bring up composer extraordinaire Alan Howarth, whose resume is just the stuff of legend. the stuff of absolute legend, and we're humbled to have him on tonight. We'll bring him on in just a minute or two. So I think our October was awesome. Did we start off with the gentleman from the Monster Squad, correct? Andre Gower?
That was
I
the
don't know if
first.
that was October or not.
Yeah, I think it was.
Was it? Maybe. I know we skipped a week, so.
Yes. And then we did John. Tonight we're doing Alan. And then we're going to do the enormous Halloween broadcast with, Vincent Price. That pretty much says it all.
Female director who I'm zoning out on. Wasn't she in there?
Tammy and Roebuck.
Yes.
Right, correct.
Was that in October?
I thought
Might
that
have
was
been.
May have been.
It may have been.
Speaking of which, what
Yes.
about your very first guest that was on the end of the night?
And dear friend of the show and just a great guy. We've had both him and his lovely wife on the show. And you know what? He'll probably call in from set if we want to, but I don't know if anybody I think the world knows this now, but our dear friend Daniel Roebuck, who's been our very first guest, and his wife was on just recently, and is just a dear friend of mine and a great guy. Daniel was cast to play Grandpa Munster in Rob Zombie's new Monsters movie. So that's an enormous bit of... My cat just opened the door and walked in and creeped the hell out of me. For something with no thumbs, I don't know how he does that. So congratulations, Daniel Roebuck, on an enormous... that's wonderful, and you're going to be... everything Dan does is fantastic. I think we've kept our wonderful guests waiting way too long, and without further ado, just a legend as far as sound design, composing. His resume speaks for itself, and just a great guy. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Alan Howarth. Hey!
Hey, team.
Obey.
I couldn't resist. It's part of my legacy with the They Live. So I actually made these up. I wear them out, and it's one of two things: either they think I'm a full-on mask Nazi, or they say, "Oh, I saw that movie." So it works either way. It's
Well, I just thought of the perfect crossover now. Okay, since They Live involves bubblegum, Scott Schiaffo, the bubblegum guy from Clerks.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
You kick ass and chew bubblegum.
That's it. Yeah. Now it's amazing how that movie still has traction with cardboard cities in LA. Who's going to argue that the aliens and the elite are in collusion and they got all kinds of shenanigans that we're never going to know about? Carpenter actually did that as a satire on Reaganism.
Mm-hmm.
But the framing and the images and the stuff he did in that, here we are 35 years later doing a lot of what we're seeing in that movie. And the only thing is there's nothing that we can shoot to take the beam off. It permeated all the media. So whatever. But I digress.
It was funny. I remember, I think I was 18 when that movie came out. And I was super excited because I was a wrestling fan. And I thought Roddy Piper was such an interesting, kind of bigger than life personality to headline a John Carpenter movie. And I think to this day, it still holds the record for having the longest fight scene in a movie.
Oh, absolutely.
In any movie?
Yeah.
Really?
It's like 10 minutes long. And I remember the first time I was screening it with Carpenter in my studio. We're going to do scoring. We got to the fight scene, and he was narrating the fight with impact. So he was bringing up the fact that they were really hitting. There wasn't no swipe across your face stuff. They were punching, and he had masseuses on the set to warm him back up, and he was taking fully advantage of Roddy Piper's fight ability.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric just did his thing, but he was so proud of the fact that's why it's so extended, because he really wanted to show a real fight. They didn't. He had to beat the crap out of him for him to finally put the sunglasses on, and that was the point. So that's there. And actually, it's funny. Have you seen the South Park version of that?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, you know you made it when something's in South Park.
Or Family
They
Guy.
yeah. So they did it cut by cut with the two kids doing the thing, move by move by move, and eventually, it winds up in a garbage can or something like that. But it's hilarious. And then did you see the pandemic one with South Park, the pandemic episode? They actually used the music from They Live in one of the scenes. It's when the kids are all they're in lockdown. They all have to live in the school for like 2 weeks or for 14 days, and they're living in the gym. And then all the just boring part of being in the gym, they played the They Live opening scene music, the blues tune.
No, it's a wonderful, wonderful soundtrack. I am an enormous Halloween fan, and believe it or not, I'm one of the very few people who think Halloween 2 might be one of the best, might be the best of the series. And the music in that film was absolutely fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got that gig to work on Halloween 2?
Sure. Well, let me back up, because this is a fairly quick rundown of how it all happened. This would be like 1979. I was working for a jazz band called Weather Report. I was the keyboard tech for Joe Zawinul. And so I was a synthesizer guru road guy. Think of me as the butler. I set it all up every day, and then once it was all in tune and sound checked, I could turn to Joe Zawinul and I'll go, all right, Joe, you can play now. Go ahead, sit down. Well, I'm originally from Cleveland, and I had a friend from Cleveland named Pax Lemon who wound up in L.A. He was working at Paramount. He was doing tape transfer, so he was just doing his job. And two guys behind him are talking about how they need somebody who knows about synthesizers. So he turns around and he goes, "Oh man, you got to talk to my buddy Alan, man. He's all about synthesizers. He works for Weather Report." And they look at him and go, "Weather Report's at the 11 o'clock or 7 o'clock." They think Weather Report.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, he gave my number. I got a phone call from this guy, Richard Anderson and Steve Lick both eventually became Academy Award-winning sound supervisors for things like RoboCop and you name it. I mean, all kinds of big stuff. But anyhow, I went down, and I didn't know what was going on first. I know they give me a number, come down. I go down, sit in the room, and they go, "Okay, Alan, we're working on this movie, Star Trek: The Motion Picture. You probably heard about that."
Yes.
He said, "We really need somebody who knows about synthesizers to make us sound effects. Would you make an audition tape?" "Well, sure. What do you want?" And he said, "Make us the sound of the Starship Enterprise going from warp 1 to warp 7, which is a scene in the movie." So that was like the test flight. And in those days, I had a Prophet 5 synthesizer and a little TAC 4-track. So it was very humble, just my own stuff. But I dialed up this sound design of the starship going in. It was I used a polymod on the Prophet 5, and it has a tonality to it. And then the idea was you couldn't just go to be over too soon. So everything was like layers a little bit more. Each time it got a little higher. Turned in that tape, it became the sound of the Enterprise.
Wow.
And that was on a 4-track open reel tape type of thing?
Yeah, open reel 4-track tape recorder in my dining room.
That's amazing.
So then I got the gig, and so that got me to do 6 more, Star Trek 1 through 6. I was the Enterprise. I was the transporter. I was all the special sound effects. Like in a sound effects job on a soundtrack, there's a lot. There's dialogue. There's obviously the music. There's sound effects, but there's sound effects that are like the Foley for the walking and the footsteps and the door closes, and then there's the sound effects for the backgrounds, in which case you're on the Enterprise, so I made background sounds for the telemetry of the bridge and all this other stuff. And then there's the ship. So I actually eventually made an 8-track. I had a TAC 8-track tape that I modified for a very speed, and there was no sampling, right? This is all analog tape. So the tape recorder was my sampler, and I modified that to go from 0 to 30 IPS in one knob. And so I would literally sit there watching the movie and fool with the speed of these 8 tracks of Enterprise noises to fly the ship just like Sulu, because those guys were on moviolas. They had no Pro Tools. They had no tape recorders. They were on moviolas with 35 millimeter film, and everything was tape and stuff like this. So they had no tools. So I made them stuff. I was think of me as like ILM for sound effects. I made I took the special stuff, made them stuff that they couldn't do, turned it in, and it went into the movie. Well, that was a great experience, and it was way better than being in a band business. I'll tell you. instead of living on the road on beer and pretzels, I actually could get married and buy a house and cars. It was kind of cool. But so the picture editor from that first Star Trek, a fellow named Todd Ramsey, his next assignment was Escape from New York. And I had been giving him my music tapes and promoting myself, like we do in any situation. And he liked me. So when he got on Escape from New York, I originally was going to be on there just for sound effects, right? Just the future effects. But Todd said, you should meet John Carpenter. I think you guys would get along really good. And it turns out Carpenter's from Kentucky. I'm from Ohio. So, and we're the same age. So we have the same cultural envelope. There was just a whole lot of, we agree, this is this and this and this, and that's bullshit. No. We kind of really got along. So he came over to my dining room studio, which had now modulated from the TAC 4 track and the One Prophet 5 to now I had a couple ARP avatars. I had a Quadra, and the 8-track tape recorder. So it was better. All right. And then he came over and we hung out for like 3 hours, and he fired up a lot of cigarettes and other things to smoke. And we just kind of hung. And at the end, he goes, yeah, let's do it.
That's amazing.
He's now coming to my house every day working on the score from Escape from New York. So my first film score was Escape from New York.
Wow.
That stands alone. I mean, Carpenter's Carpenter. I'm not going to ever take away from his ability for themes. He is a genius. I mean, Halloween theme, Escape from New York, that's his stuff. I'm not going to try to own that. But he didn't want to know anything about the technology. In fact, there would be times when I try to explain to him, well, this cooks, and he goes, Alan, I don't want to know about that shit. That's your job. So all the sequencing and the programming and the sounds, and I got the first Lin drum machine, the LM1, and put that in, got that all working with the sequencer, so all the timings were synchronized, and then the Lin drum was synchronized to the tape recorder, so you could use the beats and everything and begin the stuff. And we had no synchronization at the time. I mean, to be synchronized, you push play on the VHS machine and play on the tape recorder and just go and let it, freewheel. Close enough. Like, it's music, right? So at the end of this whole experience of creating the score with Carpenter, we're doing some final mixes on a couple of things. I think the Untitled even. And he looks over and he goes, "Hey, Alan, I'm going to be." My next movie is The Thing. I'm going to be really busy, and they want to make a sequel to Halloween, so you're going to do it. That was it. I was like, easily threw it over the fence. Like, I'm too busy. You do that. So that was the score to Halloween 2. John wasn't there, but I did have his original 16-track of Halloween 1, which I then bumped to a 24-track, so I had extra open tracks. And so I overdubbed over John's Halloween 1, Halloween 2. So the texture changes, going from what it sounded like for Halloween 1. That's me. I did all that shit. And then there was a couple of cues I had to write, but it's one of the greatest scores ever. How far do you want to go? And it was supposed to be the sequel. There was supposed to just be one more, and it was over.
Right.
So that was the intent. And Deborah Hill, I worked directly with Deborah Hill. Really ran the show because they were partners, Carper and Hill. So she ran the show, and I answered to her, and Rick Rosenthal came in and did his workmanlike job, and they did what they're going to do. And so, as you say, a lot of people diss Halloween 2, but it did take the franchise to a very similar next level, and it was supposed to be over.
Mm-hmm.
We burned the guy up. I mean, right?
Honestly, I have no idea why that movie got any hate, because I thought Dick Warlock's performance as Michael Myers was totally. He had like a Pepe Le Pew approach almost, where he did everything slow and methodically, but you always knew that in the end he would get whoever his victim was, and it was just and there were so many cool nuances in that film that I actually thought it was better than the first one. But I'm totally on an island with that. But Halloween 2 was really fantastic. Did you get the opportunity with working on you worked on 6 Halloween films, am I correct?
Yeah. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay. Did you get the opportunity at any point to meet the late great Donald Pleasance?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. You're in post-production. So the movies get filmed, they go to the editing, and that's when the music guys come in. So I never had a chance to meet any of those guys, except I did meet Jamie Lee Curtis later at an event and stuff like that. But but that was
No, I just didn't know if like at a premiere maybe you guys got to meet it or something because
no, unfortunately not. A great man,
yeah,
obviously, and he was in They Live. He was also in Prince of Darkness, so
correct.
that was was another opportunity. But no, it's like it's pre-production, which is hire everybody, write the script, plan the whole thing. Production, which is go out and film it, which you guys were just talking about. And usually that's fairly narrow. It's like the clock is running and the dollars are flying. So 2 weeks, 18 days, 20 days to shoot, and like you've blown the budget, you're done, close it, figure it out from there. So that was those days, and then so back to Halloween 2, I get the whole thing, I do my stuff. I'm giving it to Rick Rosenthal, and he's just cutting it in. He's not saying, hey, change this or anything. He's on, this is it, this is great. I'm there. And and when you watch Halloween 2, the music is more featured than it was in Halloween 1. I mean, it's louder and it's more up front. So it was used to help carry the movie. And I think that's maybe why you like it. Mm-hmm. Because you think about it, in a horror movie, you got all these scenes where people are going, I'm not saying anything. It's the music that tells you, holy shit, somebody's in the bushes. Oh my God, he's coming up the steps. Shit, the knife's out. He's going to kill the guy. The music has to go up and down with all those the things. So the soundtrack really rests. In fact, I made ultimately a soundtrack CD of Halloween 2. And you can go on YouTube and stuff like that. And I did a whole bunch of mixes, like bonus tracks, where I call them Halloween suites, and because the cues are fairly short, but I made a bunch where they play for like 10 minutes, and I intended them to be played in the bushes on Halloween. Mm-hmm. the long version. So those are very popular now on Spotify and Pandora and Apple TV and stuff like that, or Apple Music. But it's all run out there. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Now I know that you worked with Spielberg on the on one of the most influential mainstream horror movies of all time, Poltergeist. You have any stories for us?
There's a great story for Poltergeist. So same sound effects editors from Star Trek. Okay. Now they did Raiders, and I did a little bit for Raiders with them, but now they're on Poltergeist. And we're doing what's called a spotting session, which means the editors are sitting in the room. Here's Steven Spielberg, Michael Kahn, Frank Marshall. This is like being in front of the Pope, right? This is the guy. And he knows that I'm the guy that's making the special sound effects. The rest are the editors, stuff like that. So it comes to the point where we're talking about the sound effect that goes on Carol Ann's voice. So Carol Ann's the little girl that's lost in the other dimension with the ghosts and stuff like that. So there's this one scene where the whole family's in the living room, and they're like looking up, like they're hearing something, but obviously she's not there. So her character is the voice. So I said, well, Stephen, what are you thinking about? What do you got? And he goes, how about Earth to Venus? And I you don't flinch, right? This is Steven Spielberg telling you what he wants. So I go, oh, that's great. Yeah. And I write it right down on paper. Earth to Venus. I had no fucking idea what he's talking about. And we finish the spotting session. I get in the hallway, and I start to sweat. I mean, this is like the Pope told you, make this sacrament. I mean, this you got to deliver, right? And I don't know what he's talking about. And so I go back to the studio, and remember, this is before digital. I think actually I might have had an Eventide 949 harmonizer, so that was my only digital piece of gear. But it sounded digital. Wasn't organic. It wasn't real. So I'm trying stuff, and it's not working, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the times I take my tapes into Paramount for transfer, because it's the Moviola thing always in those days. And on the radio comes "Whole Lot of Love," Led Zeppelin. Well, there's 2 points where the song breaks down. I'll call psychedelic or whatever. The riff stops and they do all this stuff. And there's this Robert Plant is singing, and there's this little pre-echo on his voice. So it goes, you need my love. And I listen to it, go, oh, that's it, Earth to Venus. I got to know what he's talking about. So what I interpreted was, his description was he wanted to hear the voice in the distance before we hear it in the living room. That's what I got out of that inspiration. And I actually talked to the engineer from Led Zeppelin years later and found out that it was an accident. And what had happened is there was another take of Robert Plant's vocal playing on some headphones on the floor. And it leaked into the take, and they liked it. So they left it. So it was just a little bit out of sync because he was singing to himself, and he wasn't really worried about the thing he was saying. So that was the lock-in on that. So my response was I went back to my studio. I took a tape of the little girl's voice. I put it backwards on my tape recorder, and I played it into reverb backwards. And I did that twice, and it was on the 8-track, so I could fool with the speed. So it was like, rah, rah, rah. It wasn't just like, oh, right? It was warbly. I did 2 tracks, left and right. Then you heard the little girl's voice in the center. And then you heard the wash of the reverb going out the back way. So it was reverse reverb. So you hear, yummy. And they thought of it as like a Doppler. They referred it to as the Doppler effect. And that was it. And so that's the effect you hear in the movie is inspired by Led Zeppelin. The funny part, 2 parts of the story follow on. One, I had the franchise. I know how to make it. So now I had to do it in French and German and Chinese and Japanese and Thai. Because for the foreigns, I had to make the sound effect on the next thing. And then, I mean, here we are 35, 40 years later. And in the last Star Wars, if you remember, between Ren and what's the other guy, the other young bad guy, they're mentally hooked up, right? They're transmitting exact same sound effect. So in Poltergeist, I established this is what interdimensional voice transmission sounds like, and it's still being used today. So I don't get any royalties on that, but I threw that into the forever bin, and that's everybody knows that trick, and now they do it.
That's amazing.
You have actually worked with, a dream list of directors, and I seen that you worked on Army of Darkness. Can you share anything about working with Sam Raimi?
Well, actually, on Army of Darkness, I worked more with Bruce Campbell. So Bruce was super involved in the soundtrack. He had tapes of effects that he had recording, and we did a lot of work on that movie prior to the final cut, because there was a big special effects phase of all that. What's called Intravision, maybe, where there was like 10 Bruces and all that other stuff. So that was where they would project a Bruce over here. He would see that, and he would act the next part. So he was very involved. So that was protracted, and so Bruce would come over for the sound effects, and we did a lot of temp dubs. So we did a lot of our sound design during the temp. This is going to be this, and this is what the Death Coders does, and this is what this is, and this is. So we created a lot of that stuff in advance. So Bruce was really the main interface to the movie. When we finally got to the stage, Bruce had already figured it out, so sitting with Sam was like a treat. He was just cool the whole time. He was like, okay, yeah, that's cool, and just sort of blessed the whole thing. Little you know that him and Rob Tabbert would go on to be what they were later on with all the big
Spider-Man movies, yeah.
Spider-Man, and also there was, remember they did also did that, what was that?
The Oz?
No, Xena, the Princess Warrior.
Oh, yeah, and Hercules.
Possible for a zillion hours of television.
Yeah, the whole TV series that they did. Rob really ran with that one. But good guys. And they're from Detroit. So again, back to the Midwestern ethic of guys that are willing to leave their, I'll say, secondary market of Cleveland or Detroit and go to Hollywood, But you go there with some credos and you have some whatever, and you do your thing. And so it was fun. I had fun with all these people. I got to say, there was very few bummers being a composer or a sound effects person. You're providing a service. It's like you're the plumber or the painter or the guy who's going to do the new windows. Basically the movie's been put together, and you're now, as a finish artist, spicing it up the best you can. And you can, and really, as a filmmaker, and Scott, you'll know this, is that you get a lot of bang for your buck out of sound and music. So like 10% of the budget goes to the whole post sound thing. All the big money is in your actors and your set and your lighting and your transportation and being on the road. So for that 10% of the budget, you get 50% of the show a lot of times. And even in a case of a movie that's maybe not so well shot and produced, you can really boost the perceived value of that movie with a good soundtrack. So you take the ride. And in fact, you can always make the test, take a scene and turn the sound off and watch it. Take a scene, turn the sound on, don't watch it, and see how much information you're getting from the audio. And you can you know what's going on, and you can follow the whole thing just in sound, like a radio show. So
Yeah,
it's a lot of
one of the number one deaths for indie filmmakers on a low budget is they don't put enough thought or budget into the sound, and bad sound destroys. Like you were saying, you could have an amazing picture, but bad sound is really going to hurt that. And the opposite is great sound can save a very mediocre picture.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny when John Carpenter first showed Halloween without his music in it, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And then he did the soundtrack and put it back and wow, this is a great movie. We didn't know it. We didn't get it. So there's a lot to be said for our young filmmakers. And back to young filmmakers. I mean, I still work with people who are really making their first shot at making a big movie. There's economics involved, but there's ways to structure it to work with somebody if they got a movie that I believe in. The last two movies I did were for young filmmakers. Matt Allen, I did a movie called Hoax, and I did another one called Cosmic Dawn out of Toronto. And it's funny, both those guys wanted me to use all the analog synths. They didn't want me to use the digital. They said, well, if you do that, it sounds like every TV show. Do what you used to do with Carpenter. I want that. So this retro take on it, and also for me, I mean, they're not asking me to be Jerry Goldsmith or Hans Zimmer. They're asking me to be me, and I'm good at that. So I give them a great product.
Matt Staley, who's a filmmaker, is asking about Peck and Paw's The Osterman Weekend. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So the guys who did Highlander actually were the producers of that movie, and Lalo Schifrin did the score, and Lalo did Lalo, and they came to me and they said, once we get to the scary part, Lalo's stuff, like, it's okay, but could you do something else? So I actually did a score about the last third of the Osterman Weekend, doing my Carpenter-esque kind of music that's in the movie. I don't even know if I got a credit, maybe something in the back, but it was never made a big thing because Lalo is Lalo, and there's an ego involved, and producers couldn't really make a big deal out of it. But I snuck my stuff in there. It's in there for sure.
But did you get it at least an additional,
something additional music score or something? I mean, I never even looked at it. By then I was on to the next thing.
Sure.
But it's in there. And in fact, I remember kind of bugging ASCAP to make sure that I did something, so at least I get some residuals on that thing. But let's talk residuals. Filmmakers out there, what's this whole idea of residuals? Well, if you're the actor or the director and you do a legitimate movie, when that thing goes to cable, or even YouTube for that matter, or TikTok, there is a penny or a quarter of a penny or an eighth of a penny or hundredth of a penny that goes into paying the artists again for their work. And according to my father, that's the most favorite word is residual, right? You did something and you get paid again. So as we're sitting here talking about this, I'm making money on Halloween right now. All right. No effort. It just keeps coming. And as a more senior person, I'm really glad I did that, because if you're a carpenter, you got to keep building houses. But if you build a house and every time that somebody rents the house, you get $1, cool. So as a filmmaker, you want to cheap out and you don't want to get in unions and all this other stuff, but at least from the composer standpoint, if you're involved in the music and you create a music cue sheet and it's music by Alan Howarth, and then the publishing is the other part of the deal, which is negotiable. So on a bigger movie, they come in and they say, Alan, we're going to keep the publishing, but you're the composer. Basically, for every $1 that's on its way in, 50 cents goes to the movie, 50 cents goes to the composer. Well, I'm in that train, and in the case of Carpenter, I'm split with him, so I get 25% of that. I get 25 cents. But that builds up, and when you get into one of these cult classics, which here we're talking about it 35 years later, Halloween still exists. It's almost like a Christmas song, right? Every Halloween, dun 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 dun. Dun. Or one of the ones that's really popular is the music I did for Silver Shamrock. The 3 more days to Halloween, Halloween. I mean, that's a ringtone. Everybody thinks that's hilarious. Well, it builds up. So let your people participate in some residual. There'll be a loyalty and a whole thing, as opposed to, we don't pay royalty. We don't want anything to do with that. Well, you're kind of you're identifying yourself as an eternal bottom feeder. You're not going to get to the better people. I'm just telling you. That's all. Just part of the thing.
No, absolutely. Love the reverse reverb story. I missed the day when 2 Ampex ruled the studio, says
2-inch tape.
Oh, 2-inch Ampex. Yeah, that's the 24-track tape, the big thick ones.
Yeah.
And there was actually 2-inch videotape at that same time.
Really? I didn't know
yeah,
that.
there was. Eventually got to be 1-inch, and eventually got to be little, and then they did the what they call the heliarchal spinning head, and that's when they were able to get it down to smaller tape. But initially, video was like a big print of a lot of data spinning through that machine.
Wow.
On television. I mean, that was stuff that was all so expensive, only television stations could have it. You didn't have one of those.
Hi,
I remember
Francie.
I remember buying my first 2-inch machine from MCA Studios, a recording studio in Glendale. And those machines were like 30 grand, and I think I paid 10 for it at the time, which was, still a working machine. The funny part is my Glendale studio was up 2 flights of stairs, so getting any equipment in and out of my studio was a pain in the butt. But I hired a crew, and I said, look, it's up to you guys, get it up there. Once it sat there, it sat there. So, it's a funny part. When working with Carpenter, he made this comment a couple times. Two things about scoring from Carpenter I'll share with everybody. One, he said that scoring a movie is the director's velvet glove, which is his way of saying that's how you're going to touch people without them knowing they're being touched. Right? You're going to tell them, be scared, be sad, love this character. It's whatever. It's a great moment, and that's the thing. And he viewed all his music as carpeting. He said that's the thing we walk on in the movie. That tells that's the bed. And for him, his music, he was very humble about the whole thing. It's like we were doing the score from Escape from New York. I said, hey John, they want to make a soundtrack album. He goes, really? Somebody want to listen to that on a record? It was made for the movie. I said, no, it's good stuff. I think, and actually that vinyl record we made on Perez Saraban in '82 was the biggest selling LP of that label. We sold like 80,000 records worldwide. Well, that's like pretty serious. I mean, usually a movie soundtrack gets like 5,000 records. Sure. So it spread it out there. The other thing for Carpenter, and just to know him as a personality, he said, Alan, when I come to do the score for my movie, it's like being on vacation. I'm turning the phone off. I'm going to light up a cigarette and a cup of coffee, and I am on vacation. I am now a composer. I am not the director, the writer, the da-da-da. Doors closed. I'm just going to have fun and do music with you. So it was always very pleasant to work with him. It was a good day for him, and therefore it was a good day for me.
Tell us a little bit about when Alan is a young man. Who are the artists that inspired you to become who you ultimately became? All
right, well, let's put a timeline on it. I graduated high school in the year 1966. Okay, and I played in bands in high school, a band called the Tree Stumps, another one was Renaissance Fair. At one point, that band got produced called Silk by Bill Simzik, and we made a record. The star of that whole thing eventually was a guy named Michael Stanley, who lived on as an iconic person in Cleveland. But I first I was a Beatles guy. Versus if you're going to do Beatles versus Stones, I'm a Beatles guy. I was definitely into the Moody Blues. My favorite band of all time forever is Pink Floyd. I mean, what they did, Dark Side of the Moon, it just resonates to me. I make music similar. In fact, when I did Halloween 4, so we're now, here's a sequence. I did Halloween 2. We did Halloween 3 where John and I scored it. And the idea was to make Halloween music, but it wasn't Halloween music anymore. It was good for Halloween. And that Halloween 3 scores on my Spotify. That's the most popular stuff besides Halloween 2. Great music there. And so now John doesn't want to do Halloween anymore. He's done. The producers and him have separated their ways, and the agreement was, when you make one, just send me a check, and he puts his hound out and money shows up. So that's all he wanted to do with it for all the sequels. But that was the first time I got to like do Halloween on my own. Like the only instructions were, make sure you use that Halloween music every time we see Michael Myers. Do that. So when I did that, I really did Halloween for Pink Floyd, to be honest with you. All the sound effecty things and the echoes and the space. Like even that opening scene where you don't hear the Halloween theme for a while, it's sort of this spooky, scary build. Well, that's me doing Pink Floyd. Come on, I'm making an atmosphere. I'm doing a thing, and I nurse it for a long time, and you don't. I even sort of allude to the Halloween theme, going dun 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 dun, a couple of times, and warm up, and then finally, through the scene, Michael Myers stabs somebody, and we're off at the races, and it's the Halloween theme. But that's me being very artistic with it. So Halloween 4 is sort of the most successful, leave me alone and I'll do what I want to do version of Halloween. Then Halloween 5, the director, Dominic Orthan Gerard, wanted to go back to Halloween 1 again, and he wanted to be very much piano. So I did a sort of a retro score on that one. And then Halloween 6, probably know the story about this. So the Halloween 6 was done. The director was under the guidance of the Trancas film people, who were the original producers, but now it also was going to go to Dimension Films, and the Weinsteins got involved. So there was a version of the movie that's called the producer's cut that I think they released when they did the box set. So I scored it twice. Actually, I did the Halloween 6 Curse of Michael Myers score to the producer's cut, and then the Weinsteins came in, and the whole thing was just amp it up, guys. I got out my electric guitars. I put tons of drums in it. I did rock and roll on the theatrical version, and that's what finally went out. But there was an interesting twist. So I basically did that one twice. So if you look up Halloween 6, you'll see theatrical and producer's cut that I put out. So one is the original score, which was fine, and worked with that version of the movie, and then another version of the Weinstein amped up version of the movie.
I remember when you just brought up Halloween 4, seeing it in the theater. I guess it was probably like 88 or 87.
Yeah.
I don't recall.
87, 88.
Yeah. And what I loved about the first 10 minutes of that movie is when they're going to pick him up at the asylum, and they go down to like the sub basement where they have Michael's. Yeah. What you were talking about. And then they pack him. The minute they close the door on the ambulance, you kicked right into that like driving Michael Myers theme. And it just literally like started the movie like, okay, shit's about to start. Shit's about to get real. And you did such an amazing job in that first sequence. It was really, really mind-boggling. And I have affinity for a lot of composers, and I'm curious because I always thought he was a lot like yourself, and I was curious if you hear a similarity in this particular composer. But I'm a big fan of Brad Fiedel. Do you think that he was that you inspired him? Because I hear a lot of you in Brad's soundtracks, or I mean, that's if you're aware of him at all. I'm not sure.
Well, no, I'm aware of him definitely, and he was another guy who stepped up as a synthesizer, electronic music composer versus using the orchestra. So certainly that put him in the same. For sure, he had to listen to what John and I did somewhere in his life experience, and maybe a lot of the ways we did it, he also did. There's a great quote from Frank Zappa. He says, "A good artist will borrow, but a great artist can steal." Which means you've done such a good job of taking the other guy's work that you don't need the listener doesn't even know you stole it.
Right.
You made it your own. So let's just say that Fidel was good at stealing.
There you go. Like Ray Parker was with Ghostbusters.
Yeah. No, I met Ray Parker. He was a character and a half. He came through one time. He was being managed by Cavallo Ruffalo, which was also the guys who managed Prince and Weather Report at the time. That's how I met him. He was a very nice guy. Very nice guy.
Now, you some of your later work.
In fact, when we finally did Big Trouble in Little China and Big Trouble in Little China rock song, Carpenter went back and wanted to make something like Ghostbusters. So back to the full circle.
He should have just went to I Want a New Drug and cut out the middleman.
Yeah, exactly. we would have been there.
Tell us a little bit about working on Planet Terror. Did you get to work with Tarantino?
Nope, that was strictly a needle drop. He just licensed the cut. I never met him at all. That just shows up in my ASCAP as another 42 cents.
So tell us a little bit about like some of your more recent works.
All right, so three most recent things that we can talk about. One was called Hoax. Filmmaker is Matt Allen. Matt was a professional AD for a long time and worked really hard on making his own movie, raised his own money, and it's a Bigfoot movie.
Oh,
so
sweet.
it takes place in the woods, and it's back to people in the woods, and as Scott will tell you, if you take everybody out to the woods away from hotels like that, this is a pretty elaborate thing to disconnect people from civilization and put them out in the woods, especially at night. So it was a very challenging shoot. Did a great job with it. And so what happens is, again, the storyline, kids go camping, they wind up disappearing. So now a TV crew goes up to find out what happened, and they get involved in the same shit. And it turns out that there's Bigfoot in this forest, and he was very delicate with Bigfoot in that he didn't want to make Bigfoot the bad guy. Bigfoot's posture was, "This is my woods. What are you doing here? Get out of here." So it was dealt with delicately, but obviously, in order to eliminate a lot of the guests, Bigfoot had to appear to be a bad guy. Well, the twist in the movie is you get about halfway through the third act, and it turns out we wind up at this cabin, and there's this crazy mother with her two sons dressing up like Bigfoot to get rid of people. So the twist is that it's not Bigfoot at all. He's just wanted to stay in his cave. There's a bunch of crazies, and they get involved, and when they finally get our lead characters into their cabin, and they're not nice to them at all. What can I say? It gets pretty outrageous, like there's a girl and there's a guy, and it's the guy, except he might be some fresh meat, and they're starting to slice flesh off him and put him in the frying pan. It was pretty out. But anyhow, good movie, Hoax. I think it's on Vimeo for sure, maybe even Amazon Prime now. You can see that one. Good show.
I think Adrienne Barbeau was in that, right?
Yeah. I arranged Adrienne Barbeau to be a guest for one scene and do a cameo.
Oh, sweet.
I called her up and I said, Adrienne, I know if you want to do this now, but take a look at the script. I'm committing to the movie. I think it's a good script. In fact, that's what I did. That was the whole thing. Matt, back to young filmmakers, Matt sent me the script. I read the script, and I called him and I said, Matt, if you shoot what this is in this script, I want to do this movie. So he went out and shot it and came back and said, I got it. Look, man, I did it. So we jumped to it. So it was a pretty protracted post-production schedule. I think was in editing for like a year.
Wow.
But again, it became a love project. The people that were committed, the editor for sure, and Matt, being a first-time director, really, really picked through all his stuff so amazingly and found ways between him and the editor to juxtapose stuff that they had and make a much better movie out of it in the editing. So back to never rush your edit, man. I'm telling you, even if it's low budget and you only got this much to work with, really look at it, and maybe, director, listen to your editor, because he's not looking at what you shot. He's looking at it objectively, and he can really help you. So there's a lot to be said for that. Then the next one was a movie called Cosmic Dawn that hasn't hit the streets yet. It was a production in Toronto. Very nice movie. In this one, it turns out that the opening scene, back to the woods, there's a mother out camping with her daughter, and then all of a sudden we see lights in the sky and shit's happening, and the mother goes out and goes, "Oh, it's amazing, oh my God." And so the mother's gone, and the little girl has this thing where she says, my mother's not dead. She was taken, and nobody believes her. She's raised by her aunt. Eventually, we get to the point where she winds up being approached by this cult of people that are into aliens, and we think they're crazy, and they've got a whole compound out in the woods, et cetera, and the parents are trying to get her back out and all this other stuff. And at the end of the movie, the ship comes and takes them all away. It works.
Did you see the latest Bill Murray movie, the zombie
Dead
picture?
Don't Die?
The Dead Don't Die.
I think that's the name of it.
Yeah.
Jarmusch.
I haven't seen that.
You have to see that. I think that would be right up your alley. It's a fun movie, and yeah, Jim is you say Jarmusch?
Jarmusch, yeah.
Yeah. So, out of all the directors you
all
ever
right,
worked,
so one more.
okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
So one more, most recent off right out of the presses.
Mhm.
I just worked with Sean Stone, who's Oliver Stone's son,
Okay.
and he's the writer, director, on-screen personality. It's called The Best Kept Secret, and it's an interesting project. So he, as a documentary filmmaker, starts looking at how politicians and politics in general have been influenced through the use of children.
Oh.
Through the
It's
use
a
of
delicate subject, and the first thing is a case in Nebraska where they're starting to take kids out of Boys Town and use them as male prostitutes in Washington, and the whole purpose is for blackmail. So once they have these encounters with these politicians, they got them, right? And they got them on film. And so it still goes on today. That's all I can say. So he very carefully goes through it. Interesting sidestep. So it's called Best Kept Secret. It's available on Vimeo, and eventually we'll see it in other stuff. It's a pretty hot topic because it's all true. And they have people saying, look, I was in this mind control thing, and this is what they do, and the government's had this stuff, and the CIA is involved, and all this other stuff. And a big thing in Europe where the point is they're all corrupted. So Jeffrey Epstein definitely comes up in this thing near the end, what he was doing, the honeypots. The Jean-Benet Ramsey comes up in this whole thing that, really it looks like the reason she died was she was in a satanic ritual. She wasn't supposed to die, but they put a thing on her throat and they pulled too tight and she died, and like, oh fuck, what do we do now? Weird shit. But here's my anecdote. So first it's in 6 chapters covering a range of things over years. I do my first one, and they're talking about satanic and all this other stuff, and I do my horror movie music on it, right? And I turn it over to Sean, and he goes, "Alan, I can't use this. I'm sorry." What? He said, "This is such a dark topic that once you do it, we're like pounding how bad this shit is." He says, "Nobody will ever watch it. They'll turn off the first 10 minutes. They can't deal with it." So, as a composer, here's what I did. I said, okay, let's rethink this. We're dealing with children. And these children are innocents. So every time we talk about messing with the kids, I played angelic music. I took the lens of, instead of satanic bad shit, I went, you're messing with angels. And it worked. We got the whole thing fired up, and that's what I did. And I dealt with it very delicately. And go check it out. It came out really good. And it's really so, the reason I did it is it's so timely and relevant to what's going on in the world right now that he wanted to tell a story. And I said, Sean, as long as this doesn't get me killed, I'm in.
You should check out a film called Kids for Cash, which was shot in a town right here by where I live in Scranton, about a judge who was caught after many years selling children.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah.
And in real time, they're taking these kids from the border and putting them on buses and dumping them. And what's happening to them? You don't think they're getting caught up in shit they shouldn't be involved in? I'm sorry, boys and girls. This is real horror. This
Absolutely.
is real horror in our world right now. I don't want to bum anybody out. We're talking about Halloween, but
I hear.
So that was the most recent project. And then on the other side, okay, so just I have to drop this in. The most recent project, I'm working with this woman. Her name is Annalou Smithson. She's from Holland. And she wrote a book called Love Letters from Mother Earth. And it's a beautiful, friendly, up thing. And I just did a whole soundtrack with her. We're going to make messages from Mother Earth. I've done meditation CDs. You'll find them on YouTube. Look up Alan Howarth, Paradise Within, and Indigo Ra. And I worked with these beautiful ladies that have meditations. And there's a whole other bright side to me. I'm not that dark, really. I mean, I did it because it was a gig, but I mean, it's not my personality. I'm not, strangling cats in the alley for fun. It's just not going to happen. So that's another whole side of me. And one of my clients was the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and I did 10 years worth of beautiful nature music for trees and oceans and wind and clouds and beautiful stuff. So that's all in my toolkit. And then there's one other project that's out there. I worked with a very good friend of mine, a fellow named John Novello, who was the keyboard player in a band called Niacin, which was a big fusion. I mean, these are the million note guys. Billy Sheehan was the bass player, Dennis Chambers is the drummer, and Novello was the keyboard player. And so this is serious music. So he and I did a project called Lunatek, Lunatek, Lunatek. And I just put that out on YouTube. And it's just really great electronic music done jazz style. I mean, I guess Weather Report, Alan Halford does Weather Report with John Novello kind of thing. Great music.
Is Billy Sheehan of David Lee Roth fame?
Right.
Is Billy Sheehan from David Lee Roth band?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was Mr. Big.
Oh, right. Sweet.
And he's from Buffalo, New York. So he's another. John's from Erie, PA, Buffalo, New York. So these Midwestern guys eventually, to make a career, have to hit one of the coasts. You either go to New York or you go to LA. That's your two shots, right? That's where the real people are. And if you got your talent and you got your relationship act together, and you're not just a prick because you're so good, you might stand a chance of making the entertainment business. And I'm here to testify. I turned 73 in August. I'm 73 years old, and I'm going to live to be 150. So I ain't going anywhere.
You're only halfway there.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I don't even have my life crisis online yet. I got 3 more years for that.
Have you always had the opportunity to do your work from a home studio, or were there times you were going in to sessions in a studio?
Home studio guy the whole way.
Everything.
With everything was.
Wow.
Carpenter never wanted to go to a studio. He wanted to come over and hang out at my house, at my studio, right?
That's fantastic.
And all the sound effects work. I did that in my home studio. I'd be out in the driveway smashing bricks or honking horns in cars. I just did it, right, and turned in my tapes. And now with the internet, it's over. Nobody goes anywhere. They finally caught up to me. Right?
That's fantastic.
Now, admittedly, if you want an orchestra, there are real studios where all this magic happens, and it's wonderful. So for an Hans Zimmer type, he's now got a whole staff of guys in his studio. That one guy is the guitar player, one guy is the sequence guy, and one's the drum. And so, I mean, he had a thing called MIDI Avengers. I think he gave a new name now. But when he did this, I hated him. Hans, you're not doing your own thing, man. It's like you got all these other guys helping you. But finally, the light went on one day and said, okay, wait a minute. In Hollywood, they are bringing him whole big fucking movie scores that they want to drop off at his door on Monday. And by a week from Monday, they want it done. You need guys. There's no way you can do this by yourself. So for me, it's very linear. I sit here and I play the piano and I play the synth and I do the drums and So how fast I can rush through this stuff and how much they're paying me, there's an equation there. So if somebody doesn't have a lot of money and they want me, I'll give them a week. But if they got real money, I'll give them 10 weeks. Or like Matt Allen, I gave them years. We kept the thing alive. So that's the downside. Whereas, you go into you write it all out on a piece of paper like a Silvestri. He doesn't even do demos anymore. He only writes. He's a note paper guy. Turns it over to the orchestrator, and on some day there's a check for $100,000 that goes to the orchestra, and in 1 or 2 days, it's over. It all happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a different way to do it.
Sure.
I have only one more question for you, Mr. Howarth.
Oh, yeah,
Other than John Carpenter, who was your favorite director to work with?
I had 2 fun directors,
Mhm.
Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner.
Oh, sweet. I guess that was on Star Trek 4 and 5.
Star Trek 4 and 5. They were the directors, and at some point, I got an audience with them to have them tell me what it is they wanted and make them their stuff.
That's amazing.
A good story on Star Trek 4 with Nimoy. So this is the one time they asked me for sound effects before the movie was shot. So if you remember in Star Trek 4, there's this giant space log coming looking for whales. And when he can't find it, it starts getting pretty pissed off.
Right.
But the opening scene, we're in another craft, and there's a transmission from coming. They're hailing the thing, and there's a sound. There's a transmission, and we know they're looking for whales. So the storyline is make that transmission out of whales. All right. So and Nimoy actually wanted to play the sound on the set for the actors to react to. He wanted to get a whole real thing. I'm a real director. So the challenge is make me the sound effect for the transmission, which went through tons of iterations later, but I made something for him that started the whole thing. So the producer, Ralph Winter, says, well, Alan, we need some whale sounds. And at the time, the best whales recordings was this one LP called Song of the Humpback Whales by Roger Payne, who was a real guy who did up the thing. And I get his number, right? I'm Alan. Hey, Roger, this is Alan Howarth. I'm working with Star Trek. I know you got this great sound effect record. We're definitely interested in us, but what else you got, man? Like I figured, this is the 60s. That's now the 80s, 20 years later. He goes, Alan, it's a sad story. What? He says, the whales don't sing like that anymore. What? He says, because of the noise pollution in the ocean, it used to be that the bull would do his thing and the sound would travel for 100 miles. And the other herds would learn it, just like Native Indians, right? The tribes would pass on the legend. He says, they've lost the songs. He says, that's the shit. Right there on the record, that's the best stuff. I go, wow. I had never considered that. And he's the guy. So he had some other recordings that he did. He had some blue whales that were current, but as far as humpbacks, he says, that's the best shit. So if you hear modern current whales, they're singing their own song. It's like Next Generation. They're the rap guys now, right? They're doing whatever. But the great historic songs of the whales are when he recorded it before all this stuff happened. So there's a great tag on this. So now I got the humpback whale songs. I'm on the thing. I got my emulator. It's a sampler, right? At least we got digital samplers. And what you do is you can record actual audio into the keyboard and then play the sound on the keyboard, and it speeds up and slows down on the keyboard, right? This is how it works now. So I load the sound. I'm going to want to speed up the whale songs really fast because I'm going to make this data out of it, right? Right? So I put it into the lowest note on the keyboard, and I speed up the whale 4 octaves. So he goes from here, he's going, what he was doing, right? You speed it up here, he's going, but it sounds like birds. I go, what? Birds? So there was the clincher. I took birds, put them on the highest note. Metal birds, put them down to the lowest note, and they go, and they sound just like whales. And I had this, what they call a Satori moment. I went, holy shit, this is all connected. This is from a design of life. And whales are the birds of the ocean, and birds are the whales of the air. And this is all connected. And I just in vernacular, it was a holy fuck moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow. And that put me on a whole other journey of examining the vocalizations of birds and whales and wolves and dogs and finding the ranges. And it turns out in the forest, each bird song, they kind of like have their notes, and the notes that this bird has is different than this bird's notes. So in the forest, each one can know who that guy is because he's the one that's singing on those notes and has that song. And there's a whole hierarchy of in nature. It's incredible. It's incredible. And it's like way beyond horror movies, you know. And since then, I've actually gotten to the point where I now started analyzing the frequencies, the notes of the birds. And our musician friends will recognize this. It turns out that music today, the note A, right there, is standardized to 440 cycles. And that was a decision that was made in the early 20s by NAM, which was the National Association of Music Merchandisers. And it's kind of an engineering decision. And there's other stuff with Nazis and all that. I'm not going to go there right now. Just park on frequencies. It was close enough. All right. We'll all agree A440 sounds fine. And so now that was the purpose of making all the tuning forks and tuning the trumpets and the clarinets and all the other instruments so that the band would be on the same notes. Right. So it was a merchandising thing. But I did a research into the tuning forks of the Renaissance. Turns out the first tuning fork was tuned to 423 and a half cycles. The year 1711. John Shore, the royal trumpeter, he picks A 423 and a half. Okay. Well, I got involved in measuring the acoustics of ancient sacred sites, like the Great Pyramid. The tuning of the Great Pyramid is 423 and a half.
Wow.
And not only that, but I measured that's in Egypt. I went to the Yucatan and I measured all the Mayan temples, and they're all tuned to 216, which is 432. It's an octave below. So you hear about music tuned to 432. That is actually the tuning of the physical world, plants and animals. And it's based on what's called the golden mean or the golden ratio, which is all Fibonacci. You know Fibonacci, right? So if you look at your finger and you say, here, get in the camera. If you call that part of my finger 1 right there, the next bone is 1.618 times longer. And if that's 1, it's 1.618 again. And whoever designed us, you know, give it a name, the mind of God. If you do that, do the camera right here, right? There's a snail shell. That's a Fibonacci, right? Throughout life, all physical living things are based on A432 or 216 in the case of the Mayans. And the Mayans knew this 1,000 years ago. Who told them, right? Well, now we're getting into like, yeah, okay, there was visitors, and I believe all that stuff. But the interesting part was the pyramid stuff. It was first explained to me in a book called The Rods of Amun-Ra by Wesley Bateman. Turns out Bateman was the source of Star Trek. What the fuck? In the 60s, he used to give lectures on UFOs and the United Federation of Planets and the whole structure of Star Trek. And the attendees was Gene Roddenberry and company. They were writing all this shit down to make their television show. And he was invited to be part of Star Trek. I mean, they didn't screw him. But Bateman and who he was, he's this genius, mathematician and pattern recognition and intuitive. He was a real Federation telepath. He was connected. For real. He used to take people to the desert and have ships fly over on demand. He was all part of Van Tassel and all that Joshua Tree stuff. He was one of the guys. And at a certain point, Roddenberry told him, like, Wes, we're using all your stuff, you know, et cetera. And he goes, oh, no, that's all free. That's, you know, that's just there. And he just went on to his life in I want to say in poverty, but he never made a lot of money on anything in his stuff. It was the big, but the prime directive was this guy. And so now he writes a book on the pyramid, analyzing the pyramid mathematically like an architect. And this is where all this frequency stuff started me on the journey on his book called The Rods of Amun-Ra. And he said the frequencies of the pyramid were this 423 business. And he had 9 variations of the 423. It goes 421 to 427 mathematically. And I said, what that's all about? And he says, well, he didn't even know. He said, well, that's the math says there's 9 variations of pi. So these are pi frequencies. Well, it turns out they're energy frequencies. I met with Dr. Alan Sheets from NASA. He has an organization called New Equations, and he's with Edgar Mitchell and all this other, serious stuff. And he goes, Alan, I heard about your frequencies. We need to talk. And I showed him what we did. And he says, well, we have a thing called New Equations, and from a book called The Temple of Man by Schwaller de Libres, a very famous French Egyptologist. He said the Egyptians talked about 9 soul types. Yeah, I never heard about that. He says, yeah, we teach soul types in our thing called New Equations. And you have 9 frequencies. I don't bet those frequencies connect to souls. Well, I'm into this, man. This is like we're getting serious, right? Now we're deep, right? And this is no longer fake stuff. This is real stuff. So I meet this guy, Dr. J.J. Hertock, wrote a book called The Keys of Enoch. Very serious book. You have to read it. It's way deep. But anyhow, and at the end, the Keys of Enoch is the 64 steps that mankind has to go through to mature as a culture to join the galaxy Federation.
Wow.
Right? So we're on a prison planet. We're isolated because we're so fucked up here, and we're trying to not pollute the rest of the place. But we're supposed to get our shit together, and when we do, they'll land, and we'll start trading with flying saucers made by Mercedes for old things from Mars and shit like that. I mean, it'll all get normalized. We're fucked up. But I digress. So anyhow, it turns out the frequencies that Bateman predicted from the pyramid in Egypt are the tunings of the chakras. So to my music friends out there, the heart is 423. And you can even numbers. I mean, there's really decimals and all this stuff, but just quickly, it's 427, 26, 425 is the throat. 424 is the heart, kind of solar plex, 423 and a half, down 422. 421 is the root chakra. So if you're a DJ and you want to dance your brains out, you should tune all the tracks to 421. If you want to do chill music, it should be 427. If you want to do love songs, you want to do 424, call it. Now here's the tag. I treated this stuff very sacred, very important, very it's holy, right? And I went to these sound healing conferences and I was, really, keeping it away from the dark side, right? And in 2007, I did a movie called Basement Jack. And I thought, I'm going to try this on a horror movie. Why not? So I tuned the whole score to the heart, where the high sensitivity. I got an award that year for the scariest score possible. So it works
awesome.
both ways. It's a tool, like a hammer. You can build a house with it, or you can hit somebody over the head and kill them. It amplifies the art of the artist, and it's tuned to the listener. Much like remember old analog radio where you had to tune the dial in, and you got the best signal when you finally tune to the broadcast. Mm-hmm. Well, in this case, it's the reverse. You got to tune the broadcast to the humans. So that's why we're adjusting the music for the receiver. So anyhow, that's some big stuff. I know you don't want to go there, but
no,
I got to tell you about this. This is important.
The science of music. I mean, it's horrifying how brilliant you are, and how that story about the gentleman saying that the Wells don't sing like they used to actually kind of justifies the whole story behind Star Trek IV. Yeah. I want to thank you so very much for joining us tonight, Mr. Howarth. It's absolutely been an absolute honor and privilege to have you on our show. Please, whenever you have anything you want to promote, or if you ever just want to come on and say hello, or if you want to stop on the Big Vincent Price show on Halloween night, the outdoor is always welcome. You're always welcome to join us. It was an absolute complete honor to have you on.
So promo alanhowarth.com.
No, I was going to give you a minute.
And then also this whole thing with the frequencies. I have one that's called naturalresonance.net. It's still work in progress, mm-hmm. but I'm going to make an app so you can take all the music and retune it to your mind and your body on your phone.
Oh,
so
sweet.
That's a project that's in progress right now.
And where can people find you on social media?
I am Alan Howarth on Facebook, and my Twitter and Instagram is SoundLord1, the God of Sound, SoundLord1.
Sound Lord one.
And
Thank
I
you
think
again.
there's some other Alan Howard things out there, but it's not me. But that's
Do you have
fine.
any? Do you have any convention appearances coming up?
Oh yeah. So next Saturday night at the Coolidge Corner Theater in Boston, in Brookline, I'm going to actually play a live concert October 30th on Halloween Eve, and then the theater has a horror movie festival. They start movies at midnight and they go till noon the next day. They're going to screen Halloween 3 as part of the thing. So Brookline, Coolidge Corner Theater, next Saturday night, 11 o'clock.
Sweet.
I'm going to bring all my merchandise, LPs and stuff like that, and I'm going to actually have a Michael Myers mask signed by Nick Castle. They can have and a box set, and it's fun. It'll be a lot of fun.
David, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
All right. Alan, what was your address in 1985? So I could send a T1000 there so he prevents you from making that earworm known as Silver Shamrock.
Let me think about this. All right, so this was still in Glendale, California, on Adams Avenue, and I can't remember the house number, but it's a little rented house. If you go halfway down the hill, you're right there. It's right by Forest Lawn, where Michael Jackson is buried. So, no, a funny tag on. So Silver Shamrock. Deborah Hill calls me up and says, "Alan, we got to make this thing for the Silver Shamrock." I don't even know what you're talking about. I find out it's the TV commercial, right? And she says, "I want you to use London Bridges Fall."
Oh, you cut your mic off.
It's on his end.
Yeah, he accidentally hit the button for mute.
Unmute. There we
Oh,
go.
you're back. You're back.
Back, sorry. All right. So the instructions from Deborah Hill is use London Bridges Falling Down because I don't want any copyright issues. I want to use PN. I mean, think about it. 3 more days to Halloween. London Bridges falling down. So that's.
You know what? I listened to that from October 1st to October 31st, probably 4 or 5 times a day in the car. And I always thought it was more like rhythmic to like the carousel, whatever the carousel theme is.
All right, so that's Tommy Lee Wallace's contribution. That when we did that melody, he actually played that carousel-like music.
Calliope.
That was some music lesson that he had from the old days, and we're all being silly at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the vocals are actually me and Tommy singing back to tape recorder like the Chipmunks. We slowed down the tape and we sang to a lower thing, and then we sped the tape back up, and that's how we get the crazy voices of me and Tommy.
Just a wonderful, wonderful piece.
On a survey that I saw, that came in number 2. The Muppets Phenomena was number 1 for the worst earworm. So,
it's funny. My daughter was at Party World getting some Christmas decorations for her restaurant, and she heard this Halloween music, and she heard all this. She goes, "I bet you that's my dad's music." And she put on Shazam and turned out it was Halloween 2, one of these long tracks. So I have to say, you've made it when they're playing your music in Party World.
Absolutely. Why don't you throw your daughter's restaurant name out there in case anybody wants to go out and have a wonderful meal?
Sure. She's got 2 restaurants. They're called ARC, A-R-C. One's in Costa Mesa, and one is in Newport Beach. The Costa Mesa is the swankier one, and the one in Newport Beach is the beachy one. But it's great food and great wine, and try it. It's way good stuff.
Absolutely. Again, Alan, thank you so much for joining us. It was absolutely fantastic. Your music and your compositions are the stuff of legend, and you've made cinema experiences for a whole generation worlds better. So thank you for that.
I'll be glad to come back after Halloween, and we'll talk about something else. We'll talk more about whales and pyramids.
Absolutely, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Alan Howarth. Thank you, Alan.
thank you.
Everybody.
Have a great night. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween for sure.
Wow. What a great guy. What a great show. I mean, he's there. We've had some smart people on the show before, but he's scary smart.
Yeah.
He's like, he was getting into stuff there. It was actually like making my frontal lobe feel like it was going to explode because he's just a bright guy. Can't wait for more. Well, Alan, back-to-back weeks of having just absolute icons of cinema on the show. And next week, this Halloween, Sunday night at 10 p.m., we are going to resurrect an icon, probably, if not the most famous voice in the history of horror cinema, or maybe of just cinema altogether. The late, great Vincent Price will be on with a lost interview on this very show. The man behind Thriller and Welcome to My Nightmare and House of Wax and too many iconic things to mention. We will hear the wonderful voice stylings and thoughts that have never been heard before by anybody other than me and my Schlepp brother. Are going to be on with Vincent Price and just an all-star, and I mean an all-star cast. So you want to spend your Halloween night with us next Sunday at 10 p.m. Scott, I want to thank you again for, you said it was Thursday we worked, right?
I believe it was Thursday.
Yeah. For working with me on Thursday. We made some.
Man, I wish I would have downloaded the video that you guys posted. I'm sorry. I'm slacking. That was
You gotta
awesome.
get. Do you have the goofy picture at least that Scott put up?
Don't.
There's a shot of me from the set.
Yeah, that was actually that's a still from our scene. So that was I pulled that and sent it to you after I edited, and.
That was good stuff, man. Nothing any artist likes more than being treated well and being challenged in a good, healthy way.
No, absolutely, and the second scene that we shot that day, when I could tell it was totally not something that was specifically in your wheelhouse, that you embraced the idea behind the scene. There you go. As the lovely and talented Scott Schiaffo as Dr. Lawrence Talbot in the upcoming werewolf film, Full Moon Fever. The fact that you not only gave it a shot, but you hit it out of the ballpark. It was unbelievable. So, again, thank you. That was some wonderful stuff. So, Joe, is there anything that I forgot that we need to say to the folks before we call it a night?
There absolutely is. Everybody who is joining us this evening, please like and subscribe to David Lee Madison's The End of the Night Facebook page, the Indie Escape Facebook page, and YouTube channels. David's shows are archived on our YouTube channel. Don't miss them.
Absolutely. And Scott, is there anything you need to share with the folks before we call it an evening?
No, I'm pretty golden. I want to thank everybody for their support as usual. I don't have any of the dates in my head, so for me to try to promote things, but November is a fun month. Got Rhode Island Comic Con, first weekend of November. There you go. And that's with a plethora of View Askew folks. There you go.
I need to get the new picture. I'm sorry, Scott.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. There's all kind of wackiness, but and we got Saratoga Springs at the end of the month. Right now, it's me, Brian, and Jeff Anderson, Brian O'Halloran. But just thank you to my lovely partner in crime for an amazing bake ziti. Thank you, sweetheart. So I think that does it all for me, man.
Oh, does that mean you wanted me to take you off of that awkward first person? Okay.
And it was really wonderful to see your lovely lady the other day. And thank you, Carrie, for letting me hijack Scott for an afternoon of filming shenanigans. He's going to say the words. What does that mean?
Have you met Luciana?
No, I have. I would like to meet Luciana, but I have not. Why?
Well, I'm just saying she's a little out there. She might have been somewhere with, one of her musician friends hanging out in Labyrinth. Okay.
I have no idea. With that being said, everybody, make sure you tune in next Sunday night, Halloween night, for the enormous, historic Vincent Price Lost Tape episode. We're going to have an all-star cast. It's going to be like our Christmas party, our Halloween party, our Easter party, our birthday party, all rolled into one giant orgasm of greatness. With that being said... thank you, gentlemen, for always being my pals and my comrades. And with that being said, remember, no man is a failure who has friends. We'll see you guys on Halloween night.